I have tremendous admiration for people who are teachers and the idea of bringing arts into your classroom. I just want to personally say thank you for doing that. It keeps kids really alive and involved, and also does add that conduit of connecting the individual with the broader issues that are out there that we all have to deal with. I think that my work is always considered political, but it always really needs to start in a very personal place. And anytime a teacher involves their students into a project, it strikes me that the urgency is to pick something that you're also very passionate about. We each have our own individual issues that we bring into the classroom, and creating concepts that really deal with things that we haven't been told to teach, but also feel really involved with. For me, in moving to Los Angeles, I was so struck by the smog. It was the late 70s, and I had a hard time convincing everybody that it was not fog in the air, as everyone would always tell me when I would talk about it. And I live downtown. I've lived there 33 years in one of the lofts, and a lot of my work has been about the air pollution because of an immediate effect it's had on myself and my families. I basically developed a process where I could make images from the smog in the air, and it's used in many classrooms, both science classrooms and art classrooms at this point. The idea is to cut these stencils and then to put them on a rooftop, and the smog is very heavy. It's made out of a lot of emissions from cars and trucks that contain a lot of oil products. Of course, it could be from factories and so on. And it settles onto these stenciled images so that when the stencil's removed, the image is made from the smog in the air. A lot of the pieces that I've done have to do with domestic settings, this idea that, in our homes we feel very safe and that the problem is always in somebody else's backyard. So to bring that into classroom situations where young students can actually start understanding the relationship between their environments, the decisions we make, political decisions that are made, and so on, I think it's something to be taught very early on for kids, especially kids that grow up in LA, I think, because they're just so used to the way the smog is in the air. A lot of kids obviously have asthma and so on, so are very affected health-wise too. This is a recent piece, actually, that's on view at the Museum of Arts and Design in New York. It's a dinner for two made out of smog with the same kind of stencil that I just showed you. Probably the best known of this series is the presidential commemorative smog plates. It's all the presidents from McKinley to Bush with their images made out of smog, and I left them out longer if their environmental records were bad. And their words in gold are written on the plate, things they said about industry or about the environment. Many of the early presidents actually really warned about the steps we were taking in our industrial decisions, so the quotes themselves are very telling about, what they had really done in their presidency and what they said. So that you can kind of compare that. Reagan's the one that said, "You've seen one redwood, you've seen them all." And in this quote, actually, he's blaming air pollution, 80% of it, on the hydrocarbons released from plant life, so why worry about man-made sources? So, this type of work is not complete for me unless I really bring it into classroom situations. I often have students come to my studio so they can see work, firsthand, then have maybe small workshops in the studio to follow through on it. I created this environmental activity book. It tells how to make a smog collector and is really an outline of different projects that I've done and how to use them in classroom situations. Things like this, like how many people in this picture need to clean up their act. At the beginning of last year, I went up to Boulder, Colorado many times, and I worked with a lot of different groups, one of which was Manhattan Middle School. And I know you're K through 5, but many of these projects are applicable regardless of what age I dealt with the people. This was actually a project that I got through Eco Arts Connection, so they really brought together a lot of partners within the community. And I taught the students how to make these smog plates, and each of them came up with their own designs and put them on the roof of their school. What happened was they ended up being up there longer than I would have expected, but in these projects, I never have complete control over it, and I have to always let that go, which is a good thing. And it went through many rains, and this is the sort of thing that happened to some of the kids' images. As you can see, the exhaust from the car is now puddled because the rains kind of put that particulate. So it was really beautiful, actually, the unexpected that occurred in spite of the way the weather conditions had been. The work was exhibited at their school, and there was a second part of this project. Some of you may know this, lichens. I wanted to make sure I put a photograph of lichens up so that you could see it. They're actually this small. They can be used as what's called a biomonitor. They can actually use them to compare carbon, lead, nitrogen, other kind of emissions from place to place. So if you compare a lichen, in one location in a city compared to another, you can see how much pollution is really in the air, and it's really a cheap, effective way of doing that. They bring them into the lab, basically, and analyze them. Lichens, they're a combination of algae and fungi. They absorb from the air all the water and nutrients they need, so that's why they can be analyzed. Does anybody here like lichens as much as I do? Any? I asked that actually to a group of college students just a couple weeks ago, and everybody just raised their hand. I thought, holy cow, this is amazing. And then somebody said, Kim, lichens are also in those Twilight movies and stuff. I guess they're the guys with the big chests and everything. So anyway, so up in Boulder, this show is actually still up till August, and it is at 4 different venues, and another one is at their Natural History Museum. And at that site, I actually have up one of my video walls where these are huge enlargements of these lichens that I photographed, and then I embed videos behind them. And in the case of these, it's the Boulder traffic and also the eyes of local school kids as they're kind of looking out. They're the ones that will really inherit what we've done. They're the vision of the future and so on. Another site was at the National Center of Atmospheric Research. It's the largest collection of atmospheric scientists in the world, though ironically they study the atmosphere not in Boulder, where they're located, but in other parts of the world. So in a way, putting the exhibit there brought their local town and that discussion to the place where they worked. But by far my favorite venue for this, and remember, this involved not only the artwork I made, but the 80 plates that the students had made, was at Air Care, Colorado, which is where they do their emissions testing. So while you have people trapped in those little areas watching their cars get the smog checks. Ultimately, I want to mention that I think anytime projects are done culminating in some kind of exhibit or book or in the same way you're culminating here today with an event, is an excellent way to have students really buy into what's going on. It's not just a project that kind of comes and goes. It's something that is part of a greater collective sense. We are all strong advocates of the idea of direct experience, where maybe you can bring in people that you know who are professionals in fields, whether it's science or arts related, or maybe a local poet and stuff, and to bring people like that into the classroom. This particular project was a medicinal herb book. I had students interview one of their elders, either in their neighborhood or in their homes, through their families, and have them tell them a home remedy that they used to use or maybe still do. So students did portraits of the person that gave them the remedy, and then this was actually put together as a book. Part of the project, I took students to a medicinal herb garden that's in LA, and they drew herbs that were there and talk to a doctor that uses them. During the second semester of this, we did gargantuan flowers of the San Fernando Valley, and again made use of the local botany departments in the universities, and then the students would make in groups these large plants that were then put in the local mall. I would really want to encourage also the idea that restaurants, malls, shopping centers, strip malls even, you can get people to really have exhibition sites there and just do it on a shoestring budget. I am really nature deprived, I must say. I live downtown, and so I started making these pieces where I would make one little model tree for each tree downtown and put them in these aerial views. This is, of course, Dodger Stadium, and you can see all the concrete that's surrounding it. And this was the first one I made so that there were these actual trees for one tree downtown. A lot of times kids walk to school or take their bus to school, they do it every day, and to kind of find ways to engage them in their community, so when they're looking out the window or when they're walking down the street, some kind of framework so that they would see that community a little differently. Tell them, count the trees along the way, that sort of thing. Some other way that, we tend to want to walk through life a little blindly in terms of, I know what that looks like, so I'm not going to see it. It's great to encourage people to look differently at their surroundings. Another diptych for this, again, I made the trees for each tree location. I decided to also, in this same little rectangle of downtown, locate all the homeless communities in the same area. So in this case, in that map, I actually cut out these spots, and they're illuminated from behind, and the computer shows a slideshow of the local homeless encampments. Again, a kind of invisible thing that's out there that, we all need to talk about and deal with and figure out, all these sort of social issues that go kind of under the radar, if you will. I actually showed that to a third grade class. They came to the studio, and then the kids made habitats out of all sorts of recycled materials. And so that was kind of the closure that we did when the students saw that sort of work. Leaf Lounge, All the World's Leaves, is 450 leaves, each made 5 times their normal size. As the viewer, you can actually jump in this pile of leaves and throw them around. They're each embroidered with the name of the tree and its original geographical location in the world. So part of what's happening is you're really changing the geography as you throw them. I'm mentioning this piece in context with you because as some of you may have kids of your own or know teachers that are in high school, I actually made this project by paying about 10 or 12 continuation ed school kids to come to the studio for summer, get paid well, learn a lot of different skills, and help me build that piece. So in other words, do a lot of sewing, a lot of cutting. They got a studio experience. A lot of them ended up going on to art within college because they really like that whole studio environment. I love teaching boys especially to sew. I think it's really empowering for them, as much as I love teaching girls how to use a power tool, If you can start swapping that stuff out, we'll have a better world. That's a guarantee. Okay, that's a guarantee. After I did this piece, I had a lot of fabric left, you can imagine. And I was asked to do a project with third graders at some of the Santa Monica schools. And I said, these kids can make these leaves. We got so good at it. And all I can say is, if you just have the courage like you've had even doing this program to just jump in, don't worry about somebody telling you, I don't think kids can sew at that age. Just do it. Kids are amazing, and they'll help each other, and these are the leaves that the kids actually ended up making. And they were done for a parade, and then they could stuff them later, and have them in their houses. Another thing that is always striking to me as an artist, this conflict about, wanting to give somebody a kit, like, here, we're going to make one of these today. And I'm always really resistant of it, but in this case, I decided to embrace it, and I actually made these kits that had the same materials in it And the rule was you could use one or all of the items and make something. So it really did sort of embrace that instead of, being afraid of it. And ultimately what the viewers did, and they were of all ages, is they would mount their pieces within the installation at the museum. And then after the exhibit, the kids and the families could actually get their piece back. So it became incorporated in the piece. And again, I got to say, this idea of making artworks, for exhibit really helps to push the envelope for people's efforts. This is the Runoff Dolphin suitcase. It's a suitcase that I took into grades K through college to teach about the storm drain system. It's made in the shape of a dolphin, and then it is used kind of like you'd use a prop to talk about the storm drain system under the city, which a lot of people just don't get it. It's not a trash receptacle. People throw oil down there, and of course it ends up at the beach, especially after heavy rains. So I collected it all with my daughter and then created that piece so that it could be used within the classroom situation. I guess I'm really born to be doing trash stuff. I'm often asked to go to schools and do a project. My strategy is usually to kind of scope out what the school is like and then to see where the interaction might be strongest for the individual community. And in this case, I got the permission from the principal at Harvard Westlake to dumpster dive for 5 days, collect all their trash, take it home. I washed and ironed it, and then made stuff out of it. And then it was re-exhibited back in the school. So this is one day of the school's boxes, for instance. Now a minimalist sculpture, actually, right? When I went to throw away the water, because the bags were so heavy, I thought, oh no, we need to calculate this. So the science and math classes calculated how much water had been thrown away. And I hate to tell you, 60% of the water had been thrown out in the bottles where it's just going to be there, right? And this is the paper person again, one day at the school's paper trash. The Science Center at downtown, they saw that paper person and they said, oh, Kim, we want one of those. And I'm like, oh no, this is like dirty business, So please don't tell anybody I did this stuff, okay? And so we decided that I would collect all their Earth Day trash because that's the day when everybody thinks they're very good, right? And so it's all the visitors' trash. And again, this is actually a permanent piece in the ecosystems wing at the Science Center. It's a great new wing of that museum, by the way. And it's 48 feet by 48 feet. It's enormous. We had to actually assemble it there. The hand itself is 5 feet tall. So again, it's trying to bring people very touchy-feely to the things they've done. It's all about consumption, right? I had a request to show you a couple things I did also at the Teen Council in Orange County. Usually when I work with teens, I really keep aware of the thing that they are most interested in is themselves. And it's better to just start there. Don't try to push too hard. Just, start there and then kind of work out from it. In this case, I had the students photograph themselves, and then I gridded off with Photoshop all those portraits and then gave it back to them. And what they did was, through different Photoshop strategies I showed them, they would make things like patterns that then could be cut out and placed on their portrait. So it's very much this Chuck Close way of working. They did tell very personal narratives depending on whatever interested them. They all turned out very different. I think the idea of making a framework that then each individual participant has tremendous freedom about where they can expand and be personal about it is also a really great thing to try to push projects in that direction. Also, we did personal museums with that teen council. I started by the first day I met them, I said, okay, take off your shoes, we're going to do portraits of them. And I brought all these things so they could make sort of a more interesting image. And then the ultimate museums that they made were these models, so they learned model making, and they could select any kind of thing they wanted. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much.